4 years ago I started building a London City airport diorama. In a 3-part video series I came a very long way in finishing the airport, though there are still some elements that need to be added and fixed. Therefore in today's video I'm going to complete the whole model airport. And this video will be an in-depth guide on how you can build a model airport using Google Earth, as I take all my information and dimensions from there. Starting off, I took a look at the airport and compared it with Google Earth. I made a long list of all the items that needed to be added or fixed, which I will show you now. First up, painting and adding buildings to this construction zone where there is a training aircraft for the fire brigade. Around the private jet terminal, lots of scenery is missing. Fencing needs to be built in between the airport airside and the access road to the airport. At the end of the runway, localizer antennas and an ILS box need to be added. Behind these remote stands, a fence and some buildings need to be added. And that is all. Overall, a lot of scenery to be added. But before we do that, let's remove the dust the airport has built up over these 4 years. Now let's get started with fixing the construction zone area. The main job here is to paint the ground, after which I will add some buildings. First, let's paint the ground around the fire brigade training aircraft. I firmly place masking tape around the area I'm going to paint to make sure I have nice and smooth lines. The paint that I will be using is AK Interactive Diorama Series Dry Ground. I will put a link in the description so you can check this out for yourself. And of course the most satisfying moment, removing the masking tape. When you compare it to Google Earth, I think I've done a good job at recreating it. Which means we can move on to this next section where buses are parked and there is some concrete, gravel and all kinds of ground material. I'm gonna give the ground mostly the gravel color and I will add some concrete patches which I've covered in painter's tape. I ran out of concrete paint to paint the concrete patches, so instead I paint the gravel a tint of grey, which works as well. At the end of the video I will add some buildings and buses to finish this section. Though first we'll move on to the next section, which is around the private jet terminal. Behind the terminal is a hotel with a parking lot. Around here I'll need to add grass and trees, which I simply do with modeling grass, which I will link in the description as well. Underneath the edges of the grass I added some gravel paint and I stick down the grass using some glue stick, which results in this neat patch of grass. Next I will place some trees and scenery on here. For that I will use a hand drill. I will drill a tiny hole in the wooden plate and I stick the tree in there. I repeated this process quite a few times and added different kinds of trees, and after about 45 minutes of work this is what it looks like. Really neat, and if you compare it to Google Earth, much alike in my opinion. Now we move on to the other side of the private jet terminal. I printed some windows and textures for the terminal that I created in Photoshop. These I then cut out and glued on an already 3D printed building, which gave a really nice result. Next, behind the private jet terminal, I will add a small fence in between the road and the terminal. For that, I am going to use this mesh. I cut a thin strip which I then reinforced using some cardboard. I glued the mesh to the cardboard and the cardboard on the ground, which resulted in this mesh fence. The next area I will focus on are the remote stands. Behind there is a red and white fence and behind the fence are some buildings. Let's first make the red and white fence using a A4 paper and a red marker. I folded the paper and I stuck it down using some glue. There was a small knot in the fence which was hard to fold, so instead I took a piece of tape and colored it red. I stuck it on the fence and it looks quite good. And when I compare it to Google Earth, I like the result. Next, behind the red and white fence there is some kind of construction zone parking lot which we're going to recreate now. First I made some fences using cardboard and I colored that dark blue. I stuck them down on the airport using some wood glue, and they say you can only use it for wood, but it turned out you can use it for almost anything and it really sticks down well. And with the fences now done, we can create a parking lot on the left and some buildings on the right side. The parking lot is easy to make. Simply with a white marker create some squares in which the cars can park. On the other side there are some tiny huts and buildings. In the 1:500 scale they are just too tiny to recreate all individually, so I created one big building which I then folded and glued together. Up next I will be building a fence in between the airside and an access road on the landside, simply by using a piece of cardboard. I stuck a stroke of modeling grass on the cardboard piece, as the wall was covered in grass on Google Earth as well. It was really easy, but the result looks quite good. And the final thing to be added here is a train line entering a tunnel. I've been thinking about all the options to create this, though it's quite hard to make it go downhill. Therefore I simply cut out a piece of paper in the shape of the tunnel and I colored it using a brown pen and some pencil. Next, let's make an ILS box with some antennas. The only materials that I will use for this are wooden skewers and a piece of paper. Then using scissors, a white and red marker, I will make the ILS box. First I colored all of the antennas in the red and white coloring. And I folded the ILS box, after which I removed some of the modeling grass with a sharp knife, and using some of the wood glue once again I stuck down the antennas and the small building. I had to support the antennas a bit to make them stand upright. Though after the glue had dried they were stuck down well on the airport and the result was great looking. Now let's make these localizer antennas. These antennas indicate to the aircraft whether it's flying straight to the runway or whether it's a little bit left or right of it. I had to find a good way to make these antennas, as they are really tiny and they need to be colored red. I figured I'd give it a try with my laser printer, so I cut out the pieces of wood into the shape of the antennas and then colored them red using a paint pen. I then glued them onto a piece of black colored cardboard, and then I placed the piece of cardboard on the ground. The result is okay-ish. I am not a big fan of it and I would have rather 3D printed it. Though currently my 3D printer is out of service. That means for this video there is nothing more to add. I would love to 3D print some tiny buildings and some new localizer antennas. I hope that will come soon. For now we can place all of the aircraft models and ground service equipment on the airport. I hope this video helped you give a good idea on how I take an inspiration from Google Earth and translate it to real life onto my model airport. If you have any questions or need suggestions, be sure to comment it down below, ask it in my Discord server or message me on Instagram. Now enjoy these final shots of the finished model airport. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please consider to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and I will see you in the next video.